The finale of My Two Cents looks at first like it's building toward a classical revenge showdown. Tripwire survives the stab-in long enough for everyone to panic. The gang marches toward the square expecting violence, and Zero spends half the episode imagining increasingly catastrophic ways the night could end. But the real ending isn't about gang wars or who wins the fight. It's about guilt, emotional cowardice, and the terrifying realization that while everyone was obsessing over their own drama, someone quietly broke apart right in front of them. By the end of the episode, the biggest shock isn't Tripwire's death, it's discovering that Lorenzo Montini, the gentlest person in the entire story, became the one capable of killing him. One of the smartest things the finale does is refuse to turn Tripwire into either a monster or a martyr. Zero's reaction captures that perfectly. His first feeling after seeing the body is relief, and honestly it makes sense. Tripwire terrorized these people for years. He abused Smeralda, threatened everyone around him, and constantly brought violence into their lives. Zero compares the feeling to Frodo surviving Sauron. When someone spends years making your life miserable, their death can feel like freedom before it feels tragic. But then reality crashes in. Tripwire isn't an abstract villain anymore. He's a body lying in the square, still recognizable, still human. Suddenly, violence stops feeling cinematic and becomes horrifyingly physical. Zero can't stop imagining the stabbing itself, the panic, the pain, the blood. That emotional contradiction is the entire point. The finale argues that death doesn't magically simplify people. Someone can be abusive and still leave behind grief. Someone can hurt people terribly and still have people who love them. That's why Smeralda crying over Tripwire's body disturbs Zero so much. Part of him wants her grief to validate Tripwire as human. Another part of him resents seeing compassion shown towards someone he views as a monster. The episode intentionally makes Zero uncomfortable with his own lack of empathy because trauma and resentment rarely produce clean emotions. The reveal that Montini killed Tripwire completely reframes the story. If Carlo, Emilio, or some random gangster had done it, the finale would have remained a crime story. Instead, the show chooses the one character nobody suspected. Montini represents the quiet people everyone overlooks. While the others spend the season obsessing over romance, debts, masculinity, fear, and survival, Montini was silently collapsing emotionally. And the tragedy is that nobody noticed. Zero realizes this too late. That realization becomes the true emotional wound of the finale. Everyone thought Tripwire was the danger destroying their lives, but the real disaster was happening invisibly in the background. Someone kind was being crushed under unbearable pressure until he finally snapped. That's why the ending feels so heavy, even after the threat is technically gone. Nobody wins, they just survive at the expense of someone else. Christine's explanation about the Tartalegras and the rival Cocodrito family reveals something important about the entire season. Most of the chaos was bigger than the characters themselves. While Zero and the others treated Tripwire as this unstoppable personal nightmare, the criminal organizations were already quietly solving the situation behind closed doors, because Tripwire had become bad for business. That detail matters because it exposes how powerless the main characters really are. They spent the season drowning in fear and anxiety, while larger systems moved around them almost casually. Tripwire's violence wasn't personal to the gangs anymore, it was logistical. That makes the whole situation feel even sadder. The characters believed they were trapped inside some life-or-death war, but to the people actually running things, they were barely important enough to notice. The conversation between Zero and Smeralda is probably the most important emotional scene in the finale. For years, Zero convinced himself that loving Smeralda silently was noble. He viewed his emotional suffering as proof of how deeply he cared about her. But Smeralda finally explains the problem. He never actually chose her openly, he stayed emotionally safe. Even when he sacrificed emotionally for her, he still kept himself protected from real vulnerability. He wanted love without risking rejection, humiliation, or irreversible change. That's why Smeralda says the other men at least threw themselves fully into relationships. Even flawed people took risks, Zero mostly fantasized. And the Andy Warhol story earlier in the episode connects directly to this idea. Saying no to the girl years ago was a huge emotional moment for him because it was the first time he stopped existing purely as someone waiting for validation. The tragedy is that even now he still struggles to communicate honestly when it truly matters. Armadillo becomes especially important in the ending because he basically represents Zero's anxiety given a choice. Every time Zero gets close to honesty or emotional clarity, Armadillo interrupts with fear, overanalysis, or catastrophic thinking. When Zero almost opens up properly to Smeralda, Armadillo immediately derails the moment. That's not accidental. The show suggests that Zero's greatest obstacle was never Tripwire or romance or bad luck. It was his inability to stop living inside his own head. The final scene with Wild Boar's son quietly explains the entire meaning of the series. The child asks whether Zero's house is made of stone like the smart pig's house. To kids, adults seem stable, wise, and secure. But Zero realizes adulthood is mostly improvisation. Nobody around him actually has a stone house. Not him, not Seiko, not Sarah, not Smeralda, and not Wild Boar. They're all surviving through anxiety, medication, debt, loneliness, broken relationships, fear, and exhaustion. Their lives are fragile constructions barely holding together. That's why the wolf metaphor matters so much. The wolf is everything: violence, depression, economic instability, loneliness, aging, regret, failure, and death. The finale argues that nobody is truly prepared for it. But maybe survival doesn't come from building perfect walls. Maybe it comes from community. One of the saddest themes in the finale is the realization that adulthood slowly erodes closeness. Zero and Seiko arguing about who changed first feels painfully realistic because neither of them fully understands how much distance has quietly grown between the group over time. People get jobs, families, responsibilities, and different priorities. Nobody intentionally abandons each other, but life slowly pulls everyone apart anyway. The group isn't magically healed, Montini is still gone, trauma still exists, and relationships remain messy. But life continues, and maybe that continuation itself is meaningful. At its core, My 2 cents ends up being less about crime or romance, and more about the fear of adulthood itself. Zero spends the finale terrified that life will continue without him, that everyone else will move forward while he disappears, but by the end he realizes something important. Nobody is truly stable, everyone is fragile, improvising, and scared. The difference is whether people face that fear alone or together. That's why the final message of this series isn't about becoming strong enough to survive perfectly. It's about staying close enough to other people that when your walls start collapsing, someone is there to help hold them up before everything falls apart.